Welcome to the McDowell County Schools Annual Employee Policy and Training Review. Today you will review specific policies and procedures. Please remember that this is not the full version of the policies. You can find full version of county and state policies at the appropriate website. This is just an overview. First, we will review mandate to report code. You will see on the slide a list of individuals who must report according to code any signs of abuse of children. Pay particular attention that school teachers and other school personnel are mandatory reporters, including school social workers, medical, dental, or mental health professionals, employees, coaches, or volunteers of an entity that provides organized activities for children. When and who? The mandatory reporters shall immediately and not more than 24 hours later report to DHHR suspected abuse. You are required to directly report by an individual who received disclosure or suspects abuse. Reporting to a supervisor does not exempt a person from this mandate. Types of disclosures. If a child gives you an indirect hint, for example, my babysitter keeps bothering me. Disguised disclosures, for example, I know someone who's being touched in a bad way. Or disclosures with strings attached, like I have a problem, but if I tell you, I have to promise you won't tell. Those are the types of disclosures that you would want to report. So how do you make a report? Call this number. It's the West Virginia Child Abuse and Neglect Hotline. If you suspect serious and physical abuse or sexual abuse, you would also want to contact the state police and local law enforcement. You should contact CPS whenever you reasonably suspect a child has been abused or neglected. CPS will accept your report and determine if the child is safe or if the child does need that protection. So you might ask yourself, what will CPS do when you make a report? And what will they ask? They will ask you client family demographics. They will ask you if you know of any alleged child abuse or neglect to this child, about specific caregiver behaviors indicative of child abuse or neglect, events or circumstances associated with the abuse or neglect, effects of child abuse, if there's present danger or impending danger, caregiver behavior on the child, child's conditions resulting from the abuse. They'll ask for general information, like the general condition or functioning of the child, the location, the state of mind, the emotion, is there fear, proximity of the threat, access to those who can help or protect. They'll also ask for more specific information about the caregivers, about parenting, their state of mind, their location, their community relations. If they're employed, do you think they abuse substances and drugs? Is there mental health issues? Any kind of history that you know about the family? And is there a likely response to CPS? Just as a review, House Bill 2939 requires mandatory reporting of sexual offenses on public school premises involving or between students. This requirement has been set in place in addition to the mandatory reporter provisions that are already part of the law. A person, an official, or an institution who is a mandatory reporter must report a case involving a child known or suspected to be sexually assaulted or abused, or a student known or suspected to have been a victim of any non-consensual sexual contact, intercourse, intrusion, who knowingly fails to do so, knowingly prevents another person acting reasonably from doing so, is guilty of a misdemeanor punishable by not more than 6 months in jail and or a fine not more than $10,000. And you can refer to the code. Teachers and other personnel do not have to report learning from a witness or personally observing consensual sexual contact, intercourse, or intrusion occurring between students unless the act involved any of the following and may, therefore, amount to a crime. If it's forcible compulsion, the infliction of serious bodily injury on anyone, employing a deadly weapon in the commission of the act, sexual intercourse or intrusion with a student who is mentally disabled, a student 16 years old or older engaging in sexual intercourse or sexual intrusion with a student under the age of 16 who is not his or her spouse and is 4 or more years younger, a student 14 years old or older making sexual contact with a student who is younger than 12 years old, sexual contact with a student who is physically helpless. Now let's move on to County Policy 8-050, Drug-Free Workplace. All employees have signed a drug-free workplace verification statement. The following shall be considered prohibited conduct for purposes of this policy. No employee shall unlawfully manufacture, distribute, possess, or use illegal drugs or medically non-prescribed controlled substances and/or alcohol. The reporting to work under the influence of illegal drugs, non-medically prescribed controlled substance, intoxicant, look-alike drugs or alcohol, or possession of non-medically prescribed paraphernalia is prohibited. No employee shall report for duty or remain on duty while having alcohol concentration of 0.04 or greater. No employee shall report for duty or remain on duty while abusing legal, prescription, or over-the-counter drugs or alcohol or using illegal drugs. No employee shall consume or possess open containers of alcohol on the BOE property, in a BOE vehicle or vehicles rented by the Board of Education. No employee shall refuse to submit to a post-accident reasonable suspicion, return to duty, or follow-up alcohol or drug tests as applicable. No employee shall report for duty or remain on duty when the employee uses any controlled substance, except when use is pursuant to the instruction of a physician who has advised the employee that the substance does not adversely affect the employee's ability to perform assigned duties. If an employee engages in prohibited conduct as a result of misusing or abusing legal medications and/or the use of illegal drugs, non-medically prescribed controlled substances, intoxicants, look-alike drugs or alcohol, and/or otherwise violated the terms of this policy, the employee shall be deemed unqualified to perform his or her duties and shall be immediately removed from the assignment in order to protect the policy, health and safety, and welfare of students and adults in the school environment. The removal will constitute a paid or unpaid suspension at the discretion of the superintendent and the BOE. If an employee violates any portion of a testing facility's protocol from obtaining a sample from the employee, which protocol has been explained to the employee orally or otherwise, the employee shall be deemed unqualified to perform his or her assigned duties and shall be immediately removed from the assignment in order to protect the health, safety, and welfare of students and adults in the school environment. If you want to take a look at the complete list of consequences and other information, you can follow the link below on the McDowell County Schools website. Now we'll move into the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. Please notice the two websites on your screen. The two resources are full of information concerning how we can help children who are deemed homeless in our district. Unaccompanied children and youth. The first thing we need to understand is that we do have children who are experiencing homelessness. Children and youth who lack a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence are considered homeless. Homeless students include those who are sharing housing of others due to the loss of housing with economic hardship or a similar reason, living in motels, hotels, trailer parks, campgrounds due to an alternative accommodation, living in emergency or transitional shelters, or those who are abandoned in hospitals. Those who have a primary nighttime residence that is public or private place not designated for or ordinarily used as a regular sleeping accommodation for human beings, such as in a park. Living in cars, parks, abandoned buildings, substandard houses, buses or train stations, public spaces. Those children who are migratory and who are living in above circumstances. Under the McKinney-Vento Act, children who are residing in homeless situations have rights. Here are some of their educational rights. They have the right to go to school, no matter where they live or how long they have lived there. They have the right to attend either the local school or the school of origin, if this is in their best interest. The school of origin is the school the child was last enrolled. They have the right to receive transportation to and from that school of origin. They have the right to enroll in school immediately, even if missing records and documents normally required for enrollment, such as birth certificates, residence, immunization records, are not available. They have the right to enroll and attend classes and participate fully in all school-related activities while the school arranges for the transfer of records. They have the right to have access to the same programs and services that are available to all other students who are not experiencing homelessness. Now we'll move to State Policy 4350, County Policy 11-026, Maintaining the Security and Privacy of Student Data, also known as FERPA. A brief introduction. You have access to data tools that allow you to view individual student records for performing your official duties. You are legally and ethically obliged to safeguard those records. The purpose of this presentation is to inform you of your responsibilities to protect student privacy. Let's talk a little bit about your responsibilities. We have the responsibility to protect the privacy and confidentiality of student data. We must comply with state and federal laws. We have to use confidential student data only as necessary for legitimate educational purposes. So in essence, you've got to keep your password confidential to where only you know your access. There are some consequences. Student education data may not be released except under specific circumstances. Improper release of the data exposes you, as well as the school district, to potential criminal and civil liability and loss of federal funding. Student-specific information gathered from secure tools may be shared only with authorized school personnel. Let's talk a little bit about protection. Be careful to prevent unauthorized people from viewing your screen, such as on your computer or your device, while you're accessing confidential information. This includes your family, your friends. When you are finished with the data tools, log off and close any windows that might be open that contain data or student reports. Sharing reports and data. Printed reports can be shared publicly only after you've reviewed them to ensure that no student could be identified from the report. For example, in conjunction with other information that's available. If a reasonable person from your community could identify a student from a report directly or indirectly, then you should store that report in a secure place. Share the report only with those who are a legitimate educational interest as determined by your school board or district leadership. Let's get specifically into FERPA. What is FERPA? FERPA is the acronym for the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act of 1974. It's federal regulations that govern access to personally identifiable information about students and their records. It applies to all schools that receive funds under the U.S. Department of Education. It does not apply to private schools. The purposes of FERPA. For parents and students, FERPA affords them the right to have access to their child's educational records, to seek to have the records amended, and to consent to the disclosure of personally identifiable information from education records, except as provided by law. There is a limit on disclosure. You must have prior written consent and consent exceptions. Directory information. Information in an educational record of a student that would not generally be considered harmful or an invasion of privacy is disclosed. As described in Policy 4350, you can see the list of directory information and what it can include. What directory information is not? Social Security numbers, WEVA numbers, student record information. Those are records that are directly related to a student, maintained by the agency or institution or by a party acting for the agency or institution. They may be disclosed to the student with proper authentication. Parent access procedures. They have the right to inspect and review the records, have a 45-day timeline to provide records, and you may charge a reasonable fee for copies, but not to search or to retrieve. Exceptions. Letters of recommendation for which the student has waived the right to review information about other students. Personally identifiable information. A student's name, parents or family members' names, students' addresses, other information that would allow a reasonable person in the school or community who does not have personal knowledge of the relevant circumstances to identify the student with reasonable certainty. Indirect identifiers such as date or place of birth and mother's name. Other information that alone or in combination is linked or linkable to a specific student that will allow a reasonable person in the community who does not have personal knowledge with relevant circumstances to identify the student with reasonable accuracy. Here's some reasonable methods. Regulations require the use of reasonable methods to ensure access is only given to those education records in which the official has a legitimate educational interest. Reasonable methods include locked filing cabinets, for example, a physical control. Role-based access controls for electronic records would have to do with technology. Administrative policies, effective ensuring compliance. This also means no student data are transferred off-site using portable media, such as thumb drives to work at home or are sent via email, unless in a password-protected file. Just a little more on FERPA and HIPAA. At the elementary or secondary school level, students' immunization and other health records that are maintained by the district or the school, including a school-operated health clinic that received funds from the U.S. Department of Ed, are subject to FERPA, including health and medical records maintained by the school nurse who is employed by the school district. What can and cannot be released? Individual student data can never be publicly published or released. Summary aggregated data can be released, but only if the group size is large enough, that would be no less than 10, to protect the privacy of individual members of the group. When the identity of an individual student could be inferred due to small group size in a report, treat that report as confidential. The summary reports to which you have access may contain small group sizes and should therefore be treated as confidential. We'll now move on to the disability harassment discrimination policy for students and employees. Of course, discrimination is strictly prohibited. The McDowell County Schools and West Virginia Department of Ed do not discriminate on the basis of sex, race, color, national origin, religion, disability, gender, sexual orientation, and age in employment and in the administration of any of its educational programs and activities. Harassment and discrimination, what is it? Unwanted or unwelcome conduct or communication that has the purpose or effect of substantially or unreasonably interfering with an individual's employment or education, or creating an intimidating, hostile, or offensive employment or educational environment. Harassment and or discrimination are illegal under the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Title IX of the Education Amendment of 1972, and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 for students and employees. School personnel are required to do the following: report an incident to their immediate supervisor, submit a written report of the incident, including the person's name, complaint, date, time, location, to their immediate supervisor, and the immediate supervisor will log the report the same day with the superintendent of schools and or her designee. Students are required to report an incident to their teacher or principal and provide a report detailing the incident to their principal. The principal shall take immediate steps to protect the complaint. Pupils, teachers, administrators, and or other personnel pending completion of an investigation of religious, ethnic, racial, sexual, disabilities, harassment, or violence. The result of the investigation of each complaint filed under the procedures will be reported in writing to the complainant or his or her legal guardian. Let's review the Employee Code of Conduct. All employees shall exhibit professional behavior by showing positive examples of preparedness, communication, fairness, punctuality, attendance, language, and most of all, be a professional employee of McDowell County Schools. All employees shall exhibit professional behavior by showing positive examples of preparedness. Contribute, cooperate, and participate in creating an environment in which all employees, students are accepted and are provided the opportunity to achieve at the highest levels in the area of development. All employees shall maintain a safe and healthy environment free from harassment, intimidation, bullying, substance abuse, and or violence, and free from bias and discrimination. All employees shall create a culture of caring through understanding and support. All employees shall immediately intervene in any code of conduct violation that has a negative impact on students in a manner that preserves confidentiality and the dignity of each person involved. All employees shall demonstrate responsible citizenship by maintaining a high standard of conduct, self-control, and moral and ethical behavior. All employees shall comply with federal and West Virginia laws, policies, regulations, and procedures. Let's talk a little bit about the inappropriate physical and emotional boundaries. Behavior between educators and students must serve a demonstrated educational, health, or safety purpose. There should always be firm boundaries between an educator and students. Even taking into consideration pre-existing and familial relationships, impropriety and favorism can still occur. The following items should be of concern, especially when they occur in secret without the knowledge of administrators and or parents. Level 1. Taking an undue interest in a particular student. Favoring certain students by giving them special privileges or status, such as performing personal errands for the educator unrelated to educational purpose. Inviting or allowing certain students to come to the classroom at non-class times. Getting a particular student out of class to visit the teacher during the teacher's prep period. Engaging in peer-like behavior with students. Level 2. Using poor judgment regarding a particular student. Some examples. Allowing students to address the educator in non-professional ways. That is, for example, by their first name, nicknames, pet names. Allowing students to get away with clear inappropriate behaviors. Being alone with students behind closed doors, at school, out of view of others. Exchanging gifts, cards, or money with a particular student. Being overly touchy with certain students, teaching students for no educational or health reason. Giving students ride in the educator's personally owned vehicle, especially alone. Frequent electronic communications or phone contacts with a particular student. Level 3, personal life involvement. Here are some examples. Talking to the student about the educator's personal problems or issues. Talking to the student about the student's personal problem to the extent that the adult becomes a confidant of the student when it is not the adult's job to do so. That is, this person is not employed as a counselor. Initiating or extending contact with students beyond the school day. Taking a particular student on outings, especially personal outings, away from protective adults. Using personal or internet communications to discuss personal topics with interest with students. Being connected to a student via a social media communications platform outside of an athletic or school account, such as Snapchat, Whisper, WhatsApp, GroupMe, Telegram, Instagram, Facebook. Level 4, not respecting normal boundaries, especially if invited or unwelcomed. Invading the student's physical privacy. For example, walking in on the student in the bathroom or a changing room. Inviting students to the educator's home. Visiting the student's home without the presence of parents or guardians. Asking the student to keep certain things secret from his or her parents. Socializing where the students are consuming tobacco, alcohol, or drugs. Level 5, sexually related conduct, especially if uninvited and unwelcomed. Engaging in sex talk with students, including jokes and banters and innuendos. Talking with a student about sexual topics that are not related to a specific curriculum. Showing or sending pornography to a student. Hugging, kissing, or other affectionate physical contact with the student. Many of these behaviors are acceptable between consenting peers. However, educators and students are not peers. There is no place for peer-like behavior between educators and students. The more of each specific violation that occurs between an educator and a student, the more frequently the violations occur between the educator and a student. And when they occur in secret, the risk increases that the educator is sexually grooming the student. If so, physical, sexual, or romantic contact may occur or has occurred. Moving now to the county policy on personal cell phone use. Talking on a cell phone during the instructional time and workday is prohibited unless handling a school-related issue. The Board of Ed does understand that employees will need to handle personal business while at school. In case of an emergency, you will be notified by the office. At no time should cell phone headgear be worn during the school day. Some violations. Alleged violations of this policy shall be discussed in a conference between the employee and the building principal. On the second violation, the principal shall issue a written reprimand to the employee involved. That reprimand shall become part of the employee's file. Repeated violation may result in disciplinary action by the superintendent. Please note, this policy does not prohibit the use of a personal device to manage your own calendar, set reminders, make work-related calls, or utilize productivity apps. County-issued devices only are to be used for programs and apps such as Class Dojo. If you are going to award points or communicate with families using Class Dojo, then you must use a county-issued device, meaning a laptop or a tablet or an iPad provided by McDowell County Schools, and not on your personal cell phones or devices. Moving on to performance evaluation of school personnel. The key purposes of the West Virginia evaluation system are to set high standards of performance for both veteran and new teachers, to ensure high quality instruction for student achievement, and to encourage continuous growth and improvement over time in our schools. The evaluation also includes 2 performance standards that evaluate outcomes and other essential aspects of professional learning. You'll notice on your screen the 5 standards for performance in the West Virginia Accountability and Evaluation System. Here are standards 6 and 7. In order to be a manageable, effective system, each standard has elements. These standards have a total of 16 critical standard elements. On the screen, you can take a look at the evaluation system timeline, starting at the beginning of the year to the prior to the last day for teachers, but not later than June 15th. Here are the different levels of performance, from unsatisfactory, growing to distinguished performance level. Here's a description of the observation cycle. The evaluators record data on the observation form. Educators complete the evidence form within 5 days. Then the evaluators conduct a conference within 10 days of an observation. All teachers and counselors shall participate in an annual summative evaluation conference. Please take a look at the chart on your screen. The chart is broken down into the 3 different areas: an initial, years 1 to 3, the intermediate teaching years 4 to 5, and the advanced 6 years and beyond. Focus support plans. Focus support plans are to be proactive and preventative, to focus support for a staff member. After a purposeful conversation and when there is documented evidence indicating an area of concern. After at least one observation is conducted, the support meets the individual needs of that staff member. The focus support plan may address an area of concern involving student learning goals when in conjunction with one or more of the 5 performance standards. School-wide student growth cannot be considered in a focus support plan. You can look on the screen with details surrounding the focus support plan for making progress and meeting standards. After 9 weeks, there will be a decision. The decision determination: if there's success, the teacher or staff member has met standards. If there's adequate progress, they may continue on at focus support plan for 9 more weeks. If there's inadequate progress, they'll come back and evaluate and initiate a corrective evaluation plan or corrective action plan. So let's talk a little bit about the details of a corrective action plan. 18 weeks, but may commence at any time. Inadequate progression on a focus support plan. An evaluation shows unsatisfactory performance on one or more of the 5 performance standards. A corrective action plan may address an area of concern involving student learning goals when in conjunction with one or more of the 5 performance standards. School-wide student growth cannot be considered in a corrective action plan. Certain instances may require immediate action following code, determinative, and may not be repeated. If evidence does not demonstrate that adequate progress has been made at the conclusion of the 18-week period, termination for unsatisfactory performance shall ensue. Service evaluations. Evaluation shall be conducted of each service employee at least once per school year. Observations and evaluations may address any and all job performance duties as follows. Employee's job performance specific to his or her employee's assigned job duties with his or her service personnel classification and the relevant job description posting. Employee's level of cooperation and communication with employees and the supervisors. Employees' attendance habits, including timely reporting for work. Additional evaluations may be completed at any time during the school year. With service evaluations, the supervisor shall share the written evaluation with the employee during a scheduled conference within 5 working days after the completion of the written evaluation. The employee has the right to attach a written statement as an addendum to the evaluation within 30 calendar days. The employee shall sign the evaluation form denoting that the supervisor has reviewed the evaluation with the service employee and that the employee has received a copy. The employee's signature shall not imply that the employee's agreement with the evaluation's contents. Refer to the full policy for really specific details. Moving on to the Board of Risk and Insurance Management, better known as worker compensation. Workers' compensation, referred to as on-the-job injuries. Employees injured at work must report the injury to their immediate supervisor within 24 hours of the injury. The supervisor will complete an in-house incident report and submit that to the safety director. Compensation claims cannot be processed until this form is received. If an employee collects monetary payments for the workers' compensation fund, he or she should contact the finance office immediately to discuss the possibility of an overpayment. Return to work slips. The employee must have a return to work slip if he or she goes to the doctor the day of the injury and returns the next, or is off work due to the injury. If the employee returns to work and at a later date is off work due to the injury, he or she must again submit a return to work slip before the employee is allowed to return to work. Supervisors, it is your responsibility to be informed on any time missed as a result due to an on-the-job injury. Also, you must submit with the incident report copies of witness statements. This is needed before your compensation claim can be completely processed. Employee use of paid and unpaid leave time. This, as we all know, is a PDF copy and what our employee absence and claim for personal leave form looks like. This is the correct form. If you are using another form, you need to quit using that form and make sure that you get a hold of the accurate form from your supervisor or principal. Willful absence from employment and or abuse of paid leave. Any employee who is willfully absent from his or her duties without some form of approved leave shall be subject to a disciplinary action, up to and including termination of his or her employment contract. Employees who make excessive use of paid leave and or who demonstrate a suspicious pattern of using paid leave shall be subject to investigation. An employee who is found to have improperly exercised paid or unpaid leave shall be subject to disciplinary action up to and including termination of his or her employment. Unpaid leaves of absence for no more than 1 calendar year. The Board of Education shall comply with the requirements of West Virginia federal law with regard to unpaid leaves of absence for no more than 1 calendar year. Dock days. Employees shall not be absent from their assigned duties beyond their accrued paid leave days, except as specifically authorized by the superintendent or his or her designated representative. No employee shall be permitted to exercise a dock day unless he or she has first submitted prior written request to exercise a dock day. Such prior written request shall be addressed and submitted to the superintendent or his or her designee no later than 12 o'clock noon on the day before the proposed use of the dock day. Requests for permission to exercise a dock day submitted on or after the day on which the employee has actually exercised a dock day shall not be approved, absent extraordinary circumstances of an emergency nature which excuse the failure of the employee to obtain prior permission. The superintendent may approve up to a maximum of 5 dock days total per school year for educational trips or any other reasonable cause which is not otherwise covered by this policy. Violation of this dock day policy shall constitute insubordination and or willful neglect of duties within the meaning of code. Employees violating this policy are subject to disciplinary action up to and including unpaid suspensions and termination of employment. Next, we'll change to the expected behaviors in safe and supportive schools. Please note the effective date on the policy change, July 1st, 2019. At a minimum, schools shall establish a leadership team that may be an existing team to manage the design, monitoring, and improvement of school climate and culture. Schools will establish a process to gain school-wide input and commitment to school climate culture improvement for students, staff, parents, and community. The school shall develop school-wide priorities for Policy 4373. The school shall analyze school climate culture data annually. The school shall make data-driven improvement decisions based on analysis of consistently tracked student behavior. At a minimum, the school shall implement the school-wide plans to provide appropriate interventions and support for students. Implement programs and practices that promote youth asset development to support student behaviors and positive education and health outcomes. The school shall implement comprehensive and effective intervention programs that target identified behaviors that are disruptive to the educational process. The school shall develop appropriate and reliable referral procedures. The school shall evaluate school and culture climate improvement processes and revise those as needed. Let's review Level 1 Inappropriate Behaviors. The following behaviors on your screen have been identified as Level 1 Inappropriate Behaviors. Level 2 Inappropriate Behaviors. Level 3. And finally, Level 4. We want to take time to review restraints. This is important that we really take time to listen to the information and make sure that everyone understands. A school employee may use restraint in an emergency, a situation in which a student's behavior poses a threat of imminent, serious physical harm to the student or others, or serious property destruction, and includes the following limitations. The restraint shall be limited to the use of such reasonable force as is necessary to address the emergency. Procedures and maneuvers that restrict breathing, such as a prone restraint, place pressure or weight on the chest, lungs, sternum, diaphragm, back or neck or throat, or may cause physical harm are prohibited. Appropriate intended utilization of mechanical restraints such as seat belts or feeding tables when applied for their intended purpose is not prohibited. However, the application of a mechanical restraint is prohibited as an intervention or consequent for inappropriate behavior. We ask you to please refer to pages 58 and 59 of West Virginia Board Policy 4373 for further guidance on restraints. Moving on to the acceptable use policy, just some key points in regards to technology. An electronic copy can be found on the county technology page of the McDowell County Schools website. The use of the internet is an educational privilege, it's not a right, and inappropriate use will result in cancellation of those privileges. Students must have parental consent to use the internet and the technology systems. A parent can rescind the consent at any time, which will terminate the student's use. As an educator, you have responsibilities. Educators will teach students about the safe and responsible use of the internet and all networks. Educators are responsible for monitoring students' use and to intervene if students are using them inappropriately. The educator must report misuse to his or her administrator or the Office of Technology. Please understand there is no expectation of privacy. McDowell County Schools has the right to inspect any user's virtual hard drive and the files it contains. McDowell County Schools has the right to give permission to the teachers, school administrators, and parents to review the use of MCS's tools by a student whom they think is misusing the system. Users are advised that messages in discussion forums, including deleted messages and regularly archived, can be retrieved. Internet firewalls automatically check all data moving between local area networks and log sending and receiving destinations. Please review the entire policy for specifics. By signing the AUP agreement, you as a staff member agree to all established guidelines for unacceptable uses and behaviors identified within the policy, as do students. Next, we'll review Policy 5000, Procedures for Designated Hiring and Transfer of School Personnel. Be sure to refer to West Virginia Board of Education Policy 5000 for your complete review of the entire process. The Faculty Senate participation. A majority of the Faculty Senate may elect a committee, including a committee chair, which will be responsible for making hiring recommendations regarding classroom teachers. Options include 3 individuals, which shall include a chair, not less than 7, or more than 11 individuals, which shall include a chair. When utilizing this option, the 3 members making the recommendation shall be selected based upon the subject matter to be taught by the prospective teacher. Another option is a single designee. The designee shall have the discretion to ask up to 2 other Faculty Senate members to help in reviewing materials or interviewing the applicants. The options also include the single designee. The designee shall ask up to 2 other Faculty Senate members in reviewing materials or interviewing the applicants at the designee's discretion. All Faculty Senate members must have completed the department's designated or approved interview training prior to assisting. Faculty Senate may vote to change their selected process at the conclusion of each school semester for the next ensuing semester. Next, we'll review grievance procedures. The McDowell BOE recognizes the need to resolve differences which may arise in the workplace. The West Virginia State Legislature, in Article 2, Chapter 6C of the State Code of West Virginia, has created the appropriate vehicle for such resolutions of differences. Procedures, timelines, protocol, and all the forms may be found at the following URL. For more information, again, to review the policies from the Department of Ed, the McDowell County policies, please refer to the 2 websites that are listed on your screen. And as always, feel free to call the central office staff at 304-436-8441, and someone will be able to help you. Thank you.